Elio guys, and welcome back. So today is finally the day. It's been 2 months since this request has finally happened, but it's going down. In today's old video though, we have the Courageous Striker plus Unflinching Striker tier list, and this was requested from Loading. Well, his username is Loading, and I figured, wow, that is a super duper PogChamp idea that needs to be done. So let's go ahead and get this party started, you guys. Alright, so starting off here, quick disclaimer, very quick disclaimer, because all the mons listed here is just one man's opinion up here. I have had advice and counseling from some Titan experts, aka Lewuka, Monoskin. There's also Dodgy, even though he's not considered a Titan expert. He still does Titans, etc. So I've gotten advice from the boys on the Discord in conjunction to this list, not with just my own opinion of things, because if my opinion was only on this tier list, well, Fire Incubus would be like F tier. So do keep that in mind. Also, the way that the mons are listed, I'll try and mention this as we go along or at the end of it. Just because a certain mon is in a certain bracket for its type in this generalized list doesn't mean that mon's trash, or it doesn't mean that mon doesn't perform better in its own tier. So say for instance, you have a Dark Mon in S tier and you have a Water Mon in the A tier. Well, this is just a general consensus. This isn't like a per Titans thing, even though you could consider it that way. So even though that Water Mon's in the A tier, well, I don't use my Dark Mon when I'm hitting Fire Titan, so why would I even count him towards that? So that Water Mon in the A tier would just project to S tier because it's only talking about those specific elements. I'll try and clarify that as we go on, but let's go ahead and start talking right here because there's a lot going on and hopefully I can execute this right, but if not, you can just watch me suffer. So we're going to start here with the D tier, and it goes from D, C, B, A, and S. The strongest mons are on the left side of the tier list, while the weakest mons are on the right. So do keep that in mind. And, there's no surprise here what should be at the bottom. Dark Pinolo, obviously the weakest mon out of the whole entire bunch. His kit is just garbage. His stats are just garbage. There's no surprise there whatsoever. Moving on, next though, we have Wet Bulby, which I'm doing this totally wrong, which we'll have to change. Wet Bulby, she has what? Shield Breaker and then Unflinching Strike. Obviously, Shield Breaker isn't that useful in Titans, but I do find her usage in Colossus to be quite wonderful. Moving on to the next one, though, we have, where is he at? Fire Sphinx. Fire Sphinx is just terrible. Their stats, all of the Sphinx's stats are just bad, and they're just plagued with Unflinching Strike and either just useless abilities, but very weak books. The leader skill from memory isn't that great, and basically anything that has Unflinching Strike is automatically going to be pretty much D tier, just because you don't really get any damage out of Unflinching Strike due to its damage modifier, which is a lot less than Courageous Strike. It's not super duper less, but if I remember, I think when Unflinching Strike first came out, I think it was like 300%, while Courageous Strike is 500% or something of that nature. And there's a very hard scale when it comes in terms of damage of Unflinching Strike versus Courageous Strike, where Unflinching Strike like rises up and it just like it just bodies dude, it just dies. Moving on past that though, we have, where's she at? Wood Jiangxi. Now, I don't even remember her moveset. I'm not going to claim that I remember her moveset, but I do believe one of her moves is Unflinching Strike. It's just that her stats are a little bit better than Fire Sphinx, which is why she's up here, and I do think her lead is a little bit better, but it's really not enough to make anything warranting her use after she's Evo 3 for the guide. Moving on next past that. Sorry, I do have a list up because this is a lot. Water Sphinx, same scenario as Fire Sphinx, just not very good performance whatsoever with Unflinching Strike. And then we have Wood Sphinx over here. Same thing. Same whole Sphinx spiel. Same thing with Dark Sphinx. Even though he's a dark type, he is considered, at least in my opinion, the strongest out of the Sphinx, just because he's a dark type. So he does get a little bit more damage from being a dark type with his crit damage. But other than that, he's still just not very good in my opinion. And what makes these Sphinx even worse is Bulby is a nat 3. Jiangshi's a nat 3. You have to sacrifice Astromon to get these POSs. Like, you literally have to sacrifice a ton of Astromon to get these dudes Evo 3, which is just the ultimate slap in the face. Moving on though, to finish off D tier is a mon I'm actually down with. I definitely adore Water Sandwraith, because even though he has Vengeance and Unflinching Strike, I do believe, he has a good lead. His books are good. When he does damage, he actually does damage, and I love bringing my Water Sandwraith into Colossus, even though this is a Titans tier list, just to give you an idea of Unflinching Strike. I love bringing him into Colossus and seeing him just whoop that Colossus's butt, dude. So he brings in the D tier, coming in as the strongest mon for the D tier. Now, I'm not saying you can go out there and build a full team of Water Sandwraiths. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if you want to use anything for any type of Titan, I would probably end up building a Water Sandwraith out of all of these mons any day. Any day. I mean, Bulby has her use too, but for Titans, I wouldn't do it. Moving on, next though, we have the C tier, which is actually pretty small here. So coming in at the weakest of the C tier is going to be none other than Wood Alpaca. Wood Alpaca does have Unflinching Strike, which is what D tier is hanging out with. But unlike the others, Wood Alpaca stats aren't super duper amazing, but I think they're acceptable. Its lead is okay. But what makes it different than all the other Unflinching Strikers is the simple fact that it is single target, and its stats aren't anywhere as anemic or meme worthy as Dark Penolo. So that's why he is in C tier, because you can get some damage out of him as like a great value Wood Penolo, but it's not too much. But considering like the wood mons that you may have available, that could be all that you could use. You gotta take what you can and run with it. Moving up next though, which I'm lucky that I waited until the patch came out. I had no idea that this was going to happen. But we have Light Sandwraith. Now, from memory, I think Light Sandwraith has like Blind and Courageous Strike. Now, he used to have Unflinching Strike, because if he had Unflinching Strike, he'd be down here with the boys at the bottom. He'd be on D tier all day long. But he's up in C tier because Courageous Strike, obviously, if we want to compare performance-wise, it just scales up. Like, Unflinching Strike, as I stated before, has this like hard cap of where it goes from good to straight trash super duper quickly, depending on your Titan level in your clan. And he has Courageous Strike, so in theory that's going to do more damage than any of the others. And as a light type, it's a little bit easier to build him up with crit rate. But what really cripples him is that he's a tank. He's a tank with, I believe, 2.4k attack. And he has an AoE Courageous Strike. Like, his damage is going to be just absolutely abysmal. Coming in next, though, is going to be Water Sparket. Water Sparket is one of the OG homies in terms of Courageous Striker. I believe he has a similar kit to Water Sandwraith. Not Water Sandwraith, but Light Sandwraith with Blind and Courageous Strike. Which, Courageous Strike is fine. However, there's a lot more water mons out there that have kind of outdated Water Sparket, and it's one of those scenarios where you're dedicating all these Nat 4 resources in order to get Water Sparket and book it up, but he has Blind and Courageous Strike, which his damage is acceptable, but in the grand scheme of things, it's like, why would I sacrifice X amount of mons for this mon when later on the tier list I can sacrifice those mons and get this mon instead? So he's not terrible, it's just that he's completely outdated. And then finishing off the C tier, we have Fire Verde. She, once again, I believe all have like the similar kit of like the Blind and Courageous Strike or something of that nature. She's just rounding out the C tier mons as the Fire version, because I do believe she's Balance type, so maybe her stats are a little bit more equal, so she has a little bit more survivability than Water Sparket, at least in theory, because this is all coming straight from the dome. And I mean, she's our first she's our first Fire Courageous Striker on the list, as well as Water Sparket being our first Water Courageous Striker on the list. but their kit just isn't super duper amazing nowadays. Now, back in the day when there was a lot less courageous strikers available, this would be a totally different tier list. But nowadays, you can use her. It's just that the amount of resources that you're putting forward in order to get her to a level of where she's usable, which is Evo 3. It's up to you if you want to use it or not, but obviously there's just a lot better to go with right here. But let's go ahead and move on to the B tier next. And to start the B tier off is my favorite Astromon in the world, Wood Kana. Absolute garbage. I think Wood Kana is terrible because she suffers the same effect as Verde and Water Sparket, and I would have put her at C tier, but the boys was like, Elio, she has to go to the B. So she is bottom of the B tier. With the recent update though, she does have defense down now, I believe, or attack down with her Courageous Strike, so that makes her better with synergizing with other Astromon on your team in order to get some damage out of her, since she has debuffing probabilities, and I think that's a good buff to her. But I'm just not a fan of Wood Kana. I'm just really not. From memory, I think her stats are piss poor, and I think she's crit reliant too, so I mean, it's fine running with crit rate attack, but I just dislike having a crit reliant Astromon because it really gimps them in the end. If you can pull it off, you can pull it off, but it just makes her a little bit harder in some ways to build and really get some damage out of her, considering just who she is. Moving on next though, the boy that everyone forgets even exists is Water Siegfried. Obviously Siegfried is farmable, so there's no real excuse as to why there's hair in front of my glasses, but there's no real excuse as to why you can't have him. He's super duper forgettable though, because he has exposed weakness in Courageous Strike, which does make him better than Water Sparket because you're able to use him on your left lane to set up damage for the right lane. And if he happens to get some orbs, he can do some okay damage because he is a Nat 5, and I believe he's a balance type as well, so you know, his stat pool is obviously just naturally higher than Sparket, and you get more usability out of him in your team composition than you would with Water Sparket. If we're especially talking about into, you know, late mid game, in my opinion. And then coming up after that is going to be Water Hades. The issue with Water Hades is he has defense down, which has a decent probability of proccing, and it lasts for a good duration. But for whatever reason, I feel like the game just destroys him, and he never ever gets his debuff applied. Essentially render him not useless, but close to useless. He's just dead in the water there because I'm not getting no defense down action on this dude, which is just a sad face gaming if you're trying to get that new Fat Titan PB. And obviously with Courageous Strike, he does do some damage as well if he can get that off, but he's a left lane Andy because his job is mainly debuffing with damage as a secondary goal, which is the same as Water Siegfried, but obviously I think his stats are slightly superior to him. And then who else? Where is she at? This is Dark Kana, I do believe. No, Dark Chloe. Dark Chloe. I forgot what Dark Chloe's skill set is. Let me look that up real quick. I honestly do not remember. Dark Chloe. So she has attack down and Courageous Strike, with her attack stat being 2.7k and her defense being basically 2.7k. That's pretty fair. She also has a crit damage lead, which is nice. It's just that she runs into the same issue that someone else is going to run into here very quickly, where she's kind of in the debuffing region and not really a damage dealer. So you could use her, I suppose, on the left lane, but there's not much you can get out of her because if she doesn't get her orbs for her Courageous Strike, she's just dead in the water in terms of performance. I haven't seen one, I don't think, in quite a while, if not any Titan composition as of late, just because she's there, but you know, that's pretty much it. I also think she was like a purchase mon, like where you had to like actually buy her to get her and use her. So that's another reason why she may not be that super duper popular, but it is what it is. Next up though is someone I believe that should be on the F tier if I can move him over, but he's not. Coming in on the B tier though is Fire Incubus, who recently got an update changing his, I believe it was attack down to expose weakness in Courageous Strike. From what I played, with my Fire Incubus back in the day, this was like a year or two ago, he was on a ruin set and his damage was just subpar because he would never get any orbs and his attack down at the time was super duper awkward. But with exposed weakness, that does allow for a little bit more usage out of him depending on what mod you're running on your right lane. So do keep that in mind. I think his damage is acceptable if he gets orbs, but with any other Astramon, especially our 5-star Courageous Strikers, if they don't really get that off, even though their main job is just being debuff Andes, it's not super duper appealing. So don't expect too much out of him. He is usable though, even though I hate to say that, but just keep in mind the amount of Astramon that you have to put forth to get him. And then coming up next, where is he? If I can find him. Oh my goodness. There he is. Dude, there's just a ton of Astramon. It's going to be Dark Thor. Dark Thor is crit reliant as well. He is severely outdated just because his stats are anemic at this point in time. And with Titans getting stronger and just setup in general, defense down and Courageous Strike is nice to have. But the amount of Astramon that you put in towards him to get him to where he's at is once again a big cost factor. But you can use him to break into Titans if you need to. At least in terms of like Light Titan, because I believe that was a meta at some point in time. But just due to his stats in general, it doesn't make him super duper appealing. And he is crit reliant, as I said before, which isn't a bad thing. But, you know, it's just one of those things, man. Like, I'm not a big fan of mons that are crit reliant in general. I believe it's a very, very bad idea. Even though obviously, if I'm going to use a Courageous Striker, I want him to do a whole bunch of damage. But keep in mind, with that defense down, you kind of want him on the left lane for some survivability if possible. And even though you have him with that crit rate gem for damage, his stats aren't enough to kind of back that up. So it kind of hurts his performance in the end. And then coming up after him, though, is going to be Wood Thor, which I do believe Wood Thor is double, isn't he? Nope, I lied. Wood Thor has Courageous Strike on his 3-star skill and then Blind on his active, which his stats are very similar to Dark Thor's, but since he's RGB, he's obviously naturally going to take a lot less damage. And with his Courageous Strike being on his 3-star skill, you can reliably get that off versus Dark Thor or any other 5-star Courageous Striker only. If they don't get enough orbs generated to them, you don't really get any damage out of them. You just get the debuffs, which in some cases may be good, but in other cases may not be good at all. So what makes him better than Dark Thor is obviously just the RGB preference, and his Courageous Strike is reliable, unlike Dark Thor's. Who's coming in next, though? Next is going to be our boy Dark Poseidon, who recently got updated as well. He now has, what was it? Dude, this bot is so handy. If you guys haven't joined the Discord, you need to go ahead and join it. But coming in next, though, is going to be Dark Poseidon. He has Battle Rush and I believe Courageous Strike now. Hold up. Alright, coming in next, though, we have Dark Poseidon, who has Exposed Weakness and Courageous Strike. The main issue with Dark Poseidon, though, is he's, of course, farmable from the Dimensional Dungeon of you getting Light Poseidon and I believe fusing for Dark Poseidon. But the biggest issue is, number one, his attack stat is like 2.6k, which isn't that much better than Wood Kana, just to put in perspective, or Dark Thor. And Exposed Weakness obviously makes him more of a debuffer than a damage dealer. So he's going to be on the left side and not the right side. And he has Courageous Strike on his 5-star skill, once again pinning him down with the hopes of getting orbs to do any amount of damage. But with a 2.6k attack stat, it still just makes his performance not very good at all, at least in this man's opinion. So it's nice that he's farmable. I understand why he's up here and where he's at on the list, just for the simple fact that if he is farmable, we can't have like farmable Dark Enders out there because that wouldn't make any sense at all. Coming up next, though, we have Light and Kiddo, which, once again, I forgot his skills. Most of these are just like Courageous Strike on one skill and not the other. But he comes in with Weaken and Courageous Strike. He does have a lot more attack than Dark Poseidon. So I guess in theory you could potentially get some more damage out of him. And Weaken isn't a bad skill at all to have on your left lane. But since he is on the left lane and not on the right lane in most cases, There could be some issues with orb generation right there, which makes them unreliable in terms of damage. But weaken 80% is pretty poggers, I would say for sure. It's just one of those things, man. I mean, his later skill isn't super duper great, but, you know, it is what it is. And then coming up after that, if I can get him to move over, is going to be Fire Xiao Jing, who has Exposed Weakness and Courageous Strike. He hits the same points I've stated before with like Dark Poseidon with the Exposed Weakness and the whole Courageous Strike spiel. Wood Incubus, he's literally just Wood Incubus, I want to say, upgraded in terms of stats, because let me take a look right here. Yeah, he just has roughly about 1k more stats in terms of attack than Incubus, and his leader skill isn't really that great, but Weaken and Courageous Strike versus Exposed Weakness and Courageous Strike puts him to be a little bit more useful depending on your team composition than Fire Incubus, but not by much. And then after that we have Wood Enkidu, who has Courageous Strike and damage reduction in whatever order, I do believe. His damage is okay, especially if you can obviously build him more offensively. I don't think it's too bad, especially in comparison to Wood Thor, because you can pull him and pull a couple of Enkidus, which are pretty common in Evo 3 him, versus putting in all those Nat 4 resources to Evo 3 Wood Thor. But, you know, there comes a point where you pull other Astromon where Wood Enkidu is just, he's just dropped, dude. You're like, Wood Enkidu, release, or Wood Enkidu, go to the box, man. So his performance is okay. It's just nothing super duper amazing. And then up next after Wood Enkidu is going to be Light Shinobi. Now, Light Shinobi, I do believe, has Defense Down and Courageous Strike. Don't quote me on that. So once again, more of a debuffer versus a damage dealer. And with him being a light mon, it is easy to get max crit rate on him because of his additional crit rate. But in terms of damage, once again, a little bit unreliable, just for the simple fact that if he doesn't get orbs, it's not going to be super duper great. But let me look at his skill set once again. Like, it's just a lot of mons to talk about. Yeah, so he has Courageous Strike on his passive skill and not his active, which is great. And then his active is just Defense Down, obviously applying debuff. So he doesn't really have to worry about too much orb generation. I do take that back. But, you know, 3.5k attack stat, his HP and defense are fine. It's just that there's just better, more reliable, and or farmable Courageous Strikers that can get a better performance than Light Shinobi. Because he could be hitting Courageous Strike with all of his moves and then get some orbs and start spamming Defense Down, and it's like, well, congratulations, there goes my DPS from Light Shinobi. And then coming up past him is going to be Wood Zubaji, who's a single target type, which kind of excels her versus the others. And even though she's like a defender, I believe, or a tank, one of the two, you can fully build her out with like crit damage attack or crit rate attack, and it doesn't really hurt her performance whatsoever, just because her stats are very, very put together. And I think she has like blind and Courageous Strike or something of that nature. So once her Courageous Strike does hit as a single target, her damage is pretty decent, which I find at least more reliable than Light Shinobi in terms of Titans, which is why she is where she is at. Coming up past her, though, is going to be Water Gilgamesh, if I can move him over. He has Weaken and Courageous Strike, which is just, at least for me, it feels like it's a lot more reliable than Water Hades Defense Down. And Weaken in general is just a little bit more spicier than Defense Down. Defense Down is like prehistoric. Weaken is like the new age stuff. And his stat distribution isn't too bad either. Let me take a look. If I can type. Yeah, 3k attack and 2.8k defense, Weaken and Courageous Strike. He's a balanced type. He also has Charging Stance as his later skill. Not saying that you're going to use him as a later skill, but with books up, his Weaken does get a fat damage boost as well as it goes to 80% for, what was that, 3 turns. So it's pretty chunky if you were to book him up, which obviously I'm trying to keep that in mind for the whole tier list, is that these mons are booked up in preferably optimal situations, regardless of whatever Titan that they're fighting. So, I mean, there's not too much else to say about him. Dark Amayoji, if I can get her to move over. Same spiel. I think she has Weaken and Courageous Strike as well. Let me double check. Yep, Weaken and Courageous Strike. Same thing as not Wood, but Water Gilgamesh. And that's pretty much it. Obviously, since she's a dark type, though, she does benefit from naturally higher stats than him and that crit damage. It's just that you need her to get her active off if you're trying to get some real damage from her. But she's more of a debuffing type mon, which you can use her for damage still. Don't get me wrong. It's just that it's not going to be super duper top tier unless that's all that you have. Coming up after that, though, is Wood Scheherazade. She has damage reduction, I believe, in Courageous Strike, so very, very similar to Wood Enkidu, but she's just the fire version of that, and why she is a little bit leagues better than Wood Enkidu is just depending on the Titan itself. So she does have her uses on your Titan team composition, depending on what composition that you have, at least in my opinion, more than what Wood Enkidu has. And that's it for her. And then we have Light Gilga coming in next after her, which Light Gilga, he has Courageous Strike and Attack Up. So you could possibly use him for some potential damage dealing with his Courageous Strike being on his 3-star skill. And his stats aren't that bad at all either. But what's a nice bonus is his Attack Up does add some utility depending on what Astramon that you're using, where he can buff up not only his attack and his damage, but whatever mon that's on the same side as him, they can also get a hefty boost in damage as well. And, you know, he's at least one of the decent Light and Dark Nat 5s to pull, along with Amayoji. Obviously, I would prefer a Light Gilga over a Light Shinobi, but it's not like you have a choice in that matter. Then coming up past him is going to be Light Wendigo. Still an outdated mon, but super duper useful. One of the best Nat 4 Courageous Strikers that you can pick up, even though both of his moves aren't even Courageous Strike, if I do recall. But he's been here since MSL's inception, I want to say, or at least close to it, and he's just a staple on the team for doing a lot of damage until he gets replaced, depending on your Titan setup, with a mon like Light Siegfried, if I can speak. But that's pretty much all I have to say about that, other than it's SG. Another MSL player literally has 10 of these guys, and I'm disgusted because I have zero. And let me see right here. Coming up next past Light Wendigo, though, is going to be Water Harley, which is a super duper great buff versus Water Sparkit, because let me pull them up real quick just for comparison's sake. So, Water Harley is obviously a balanced type, but she does have a Death Blow leader skill, which is super duper great. She has Courageous Strike on her 3-star skill, even though she is crit reliant, just the same as Water Sparkit. And while she has less attack than Water Sparkit, with her Courageous Strike being on her passive versus her active, it means she's just a lot more reliable. And obviously, if she doesn't get any orbs, it's like, great, dude, continue to do some damage. But what really makes her like boosted in terms of her damage versus lovely Water Sparkit is that crit rate lead. She's just a better mon in general with that Courageous Strike being on her 3-star versus her 5-star skill. And she's one of the mons, like I said before, where if you're going to be sacrificing all these Nat 4s, you might as well sacrifice it and get the best of the best, or the better of the better versus Spark It. Like, why would you do that to yourselves? Why would any of you guys do that to yourselves? Just FYI. If you didn't know, now you know. But Water Harley is a solid Water Astramon, even though she is not outdated now, but she is a little bit weakened because of our newest edition. And to go and wrap things up over here, though, we have Wood Amayoji with her most recent update, making her more viable than ever. What does she have again? defense down, and courageous strike. So not only can she debuff on the left lane, but there's also a chance that she can hit them boys with courageous strike, which, you know, Wood Fibian has been a homie for quite a while because of his accessibility, his farm ability, and just making sure that he can get his lovely debuffs off. But what if I told you you could replace him with something even better? Because defense down 80% chance for 2 turns is pretty useful, and her stats in general are a nice upgrade in terms of Wood Fibian. So Wood Amayoji, I'm going to go ahead and give her this for the B tier because there's not super duper amazing Wood Courageous Strikers out there other than the one that we're going to talk about here shortly. But, you know, she definitely does her job. Alright, and then coming in next though, he did get a lovely update where he's no longer a tank, I believe. He is now an actual attacker, so his stats also got a nice increase, mainly just his attack. But we have not Wood Poseidon, but Fire Poseidon starting off the A tier. Remember, we're reading from right to left. Whoever's on the furthest left side is the strongest. Whoever's on the furthest right side is obviously the weakest of that tier list. But we have lovely Fire Poseidon. Put this dude on a leech set. He has what? Weaken and Courageous Strike. Don't quote me on that order, but he can get the job done. Very, very good Fire Astromon just in general if you're doing Wood Titan, and that's pretty much all I have to say about him. Moving on next though, after that we have lovely Light Boltwing, who has Courageous Strike and Exposed Weakness, I want to say. So if you don't have that much access to light Courageous Strikers like Wendigo, which story of my life right here, he could definitely suit you well. He does have a super evolution to help boost up his stats, but in terms of usability, obviously he's A tier because he is farmable, even though it's cringe farming to get him. But that doesn't mean that he's not, you know, he's not useful at all. So he is obtainable, which makes him a lot more useful than what he could be. But it's just that his performance, once again, is kind of gimped with the whole exposed weakness factor, and his stats could be a little bit higher, but in context of the Titan that he's used on, he does his job okay. And then coming in after that, though, we have Wood Garuda. The boys coming in here with the Weaken and a Courageous Strike, which obviously makes them more appealing than Wood Amayoji, because Weaken, you affect not only attack and defense, well, you take... Let me rephrase that. Because with Weaken, not only do you affect the defense, which is what Wood Amayoji has, but you can also affect the attack of the Titan. I believe it's just not as much as Wood Amayoji's defense in terms of just potency. But if I get two and one, oh, I'm good. I'm good. His animation's nice and quick too, and he's just a left lane Andy hanging out, debuffing, hopefully getting some damage off and helping to set up his other fellow Wood Astromon for a whole bunch of damage. And then after that, though, we have coming in here, bringing a heat, Water Indy. Yep, Water Indra. Decent lead on him too. Actually, spectacular lead on him, helping to boost up the damage of all of your Water Astromon. In terms of Titans, he comes in with attack down and Courageous Strike, so not only can he help your party members take less damage, but hopefully he can do some damage himself. His stat distribution as a balance type 2 is pretty fair off. It's pretty nice. I mean, I'm not saying that he's going to do outrageous damage, but at least in comparison to the other guys, he can do some damage depending on your team setup, and he is just a big staple on the left side of Water Titan teams because that attack down is just super handy, and he's just in general super reliable. And the leader skill, just to top it off, is like Smiley Face Gaming. And then coming up next after that is going to be Light Mr. C, aka Sir Nunos, Kernunos. I'm just going to call him Mr. C so I don't slaughter his name too much. Obviously, this is going to be superior than Light Boltwing because I believe he has Courageous Strike and Attack Up, doesn't he? Let me check. Nope, he doesn't have Attack Up. He has Attack Shield, I believe, for the whole entire squad. So, with a 3.7k attack stat, though, that's pretty fat. And Courageous Strike being his 3-star skill makes him super duper reliable in terms of orb production because he doesn't have to rely on that. But if he does get enough orbs, since he's already built for damage, it really synergizes with his attack-based shield. They'll go ahead and put that up, and plus there's healing involved as well with that shield, just being, in general, just a bro. So he is a big sacrifice. He is a lot bigger sacrifice than just Nat 4s because he is a Nat 5, but at least that sacrifice, in majority of our opinions, is quite worthy. And then after that, we have lovely Wood Panolo. Now, Wood Panolo would be S tier. Unfortunately, he was nerfed, but I don't want to say that he was nerfed in the way that a lot of us thought he was initially. So I believe he lost Courageous Strike on his 5-star skill, and that got replaced with Unflinching Strike, which isn't that great. But other than that, I don't think there was any stat change or anything to him, which, keep in mind, he's still A tier today. Like, if he's had that Courageous Strike on his 5-star, dude would be banging. But 433 was like, we opened up a can of worms, and we need to kind of nerf this because he's just too powerful. But Great Mon, even though he's in that 3, it's hilarious that he's this far in the list. But considering the biggest issue with MSO, especially in the past, was just not having that many Wood Courageous Strikers, having him, especially when the game began, was like godsend. Absolute godsend. There's Mons that have replaced him now, but just because they've replaced him still doesn't mean that he's not bad at all. Which he isn't bad at all. He can still do probably at least top 3 or top 4 damage, depending on your team composition and gem quality for your Titans teams in terms of hitting Water Titan. So don't mess with Panolo. The dude doesn't play at all. And what's weird is that 433 still kind of has this weird champ thing with him where they don't really like giving him out, or they only give like one of him out per year because they believe like he's just too powerful. Which he isn't nowadays, but I don't know. It's just one of those things, man. Like, they put him out and they're like, I never want to make this mistake again. Coming up next after him, I wish this thing would work properly, but it doesn't. So we're going to keep it moving. It's going to be Dark Jormungandr, which I forgot his moveset because don't judge me, but it is what it is. He has Courageous Strike and Defense down. He also has a Discernment lead, which is nice in hopes of applying debuffs to whatever Titan that you're fighting. But with a 3.7k attack stat, the same as lovely Light Mr. C, you can get some decent damage out of him. Having his Courageous Strike on his 3-star skill, once again, there's reliability there because you don't have to worry too much about orb production. And then even with orb production, he has defense down, which lasts 80% for 3 turns on its 5-star skill, which isn't really anything to scoff at in terms of like debuffing. That's a nice long debuff, which hopefully, you know, he can get off. But with him being a dark type, he gets that additional crit damage bonus as well. So yeah, it's reasonable where he's at. And then after that, we have Dark Gian, which I need to look him up too, even though he's brand new. It's kind of hard to kind of memorize all of this. He has Courageous Strike and Attack down, so he's kind of similar to Dark Jormungandr. He just has Attack down versus Defense down. Stat-wise, pretty much identical. He has a crit rate lead though, and Jormungandr has a Discernment lead. But other than that, I mean, obviously I want to make sure that the Titan does less damage to me than what I do to it, and there's other Ashramon there that you can use for defense down, which doesn't make it as appealing as attack down. So that's why he is where he's at, because, you know, hopefully he can help some survivability happen in your squad. And once again, as a dark type, he does get that benefit of additional crit damage. Coming in after that, though, we have Dark Shaoujing. Very similar thing here with Gian, where I believe, what does he have? Courageous Strike and Weaken. Like, if you guys notice the pattern here, Gian and Jormungandr both have similar things, and then Dark Sha basically brings it home where he has Courageous Strike. He has pretty much identical stats to the other two, minus his maybe defense and slightly different HP. And his leader skill is the same as Jiang Wuqi's, which is a crit rate lead, which, you know, use it if you need to. But with Courageous Strike on his 3-star skill, that obviously makes him a lot more reliable in terms of damage. And then Weaken is his 5-star skill. So not only do I get a taste of that defense debuff, but I also get to apply the attack debuff to the enemy as well. Boys. Dark type, so crit damage bonus as well. So if you had to use any of these three, obviously Dark Xiao Jing would be the one for you. Not like you have a choice though. Coming in after that though is going to be Fire Wukong. Yes, Fire Wukong. The boy has defense down, which lasts, I believe, for 2 turns. Let me double check that. Let me clarify that real quick. Yep, 2 turns, and then Courageous Strike. Decent stat distribution for him, even though he's coming in with like a 2.5k defensive stat. He has a crit damage lead though, which obviously kind of like moves him towards the top of the boat, or just the top of the position for this tier list, because that crit damage lead means a lot for all of your Astromon, especially your other Courageous Strikers, which, keep in mind, is wonderful, especially for hitting Wood Titan. But not only does he have like a reliable state in terms of getting his defense down going, but his Courageous Strike can do some damage as well. And with his debuffing probabilities, having him on an elite set just enables him to do more damage, which enables more survivability, which enables more orb production, hopefully getting that Courageous Strike off for just more damage in general. So in terms of Wood Titan, very, very good mon to have. It's nice that he is available from the hero dungeon. So if you guys got any Fire Wukongs hanging out, don't feed him. Please don't feed him. You can feed the Wood Wukong, you can feed the Water Wukong, but keep your fires, man. Keep your fires, because he's great. And coming up past him though is lovely Fire Shinobi with his Courageous Strike and attack down. Fire Shinobi, just like the other Shinobi, which is Light Shinobi, is single target, but with his Courageous Strike, I do believe being on his, his 3-star skill, not his 5-star skill. Obviously there's a lot more reliability right here. His attack stat is 3k and his defense stat is 2.9k, and as a balance type with 32k HP, his stat distribution is wonderful. He really bodes well with Elite set as well. Survivability is great. Crit damage, attack all day. If you get this boy in Elite set, you're in business. Overall, just a great mon to have in terms of Wood Titan. He's been a big staple here, and I think he's going to continue to be a big staple even after like a double Fire Courageous Striker comes out in the future. And then, last but not least, to go ahead and end this A tier list, we have Water Balrona. Yes, I had to pause for that. Water Balrona. She would have been higher, or she should have been higher, but with our newest Astromon, obviously things have changed. But we have Water Balrona coming in with her Courageous Strike and defense down, so you can get some decent damage out of her if I can learn how to speak correctly. But you know, with her Courageous Strike is on her 3-star skill, making her super duper reliable. She has an attack lead, which is always awesome to have, just like Indra's, for example. And then her defense down is 80% chance for 2 turns, which once again is great if that happens, but it's not a super big deal if it doesn't happen. But with a 3.5k attack stat, that's always super duper nice to have. And you know, she's just a great mon. She obviously isn't nerfed, but she isn't as appealing as she was within the last month, just because of who else has joined the tier list. But let's go ahead and wrap it up, boys, and give you guys the S tier for all these boys and girls. So starting off the S tier, the weakest out of the bunch, which isn't really that weak, is going to be Light Siegfried. Farmable Astromon, great to have for your Titans because he is farmable and he's double Courageous Strikers. Let me let you in on this little secret. All S tier Astromon are double Courageous Strikers. That's it. That's literally it. But great attack stat. What is his lead? I don't think his lead is that useful, but great attack stat, Courageous Strike on both skills, meaning you can get the most damage out of him on that right lane because he's going to be reliable regardless of how many orbs he gets or how many orbs he doesn't get, and just overall a great mon to have. Coming in after that though, we have Wood Merlin. Once again, just a great Astromon balance type, double Courageous Strike, just the same as Light Siegfried. My boy Luca has done a disgusting amount of damage with his Merlin. Disgusting amount of damage with a crit damage attack build on him on ruin. It's just amazing the amount of damage that you can get out of him and how reliable he is. And his books just help give him another edge in terms of damage, at least in respect to all the other Wood Astromon out there. So Wood Merlin, super duper great. Obviously one of the best mons. And then, with no surprise to anyone, we have Water Acer, which tops Balrona. Because Balrona can debuff, which is an issue, especially on the right side, when you already have debuffers like your Shelly or your Hades or your whatever on the bottom side of the tier list on the left side. So having her as a double Courageous Striker, even though her attack stat is significantly lower than Balrona's, works his way out, because Balrona could get orbs over and over and just spam defense down. Rest in peace to your Courageous Strike. Acer, you don't gotta worry about that. It's just damage, damage, damage. And with her lead, which is a crit damage lead, I do believe as well, it's like, boys, we up in there, man. We up in there. From the testing that I've gathered so far since our introduction, though, everyone said that she's smiley face gaming, which is why she is where she is at on this list. And to end it off, to no surprise to anyone, it's going to be my boy, Dark Indy, aka Dark Indra. He's just top dog. Double Courageous Striker. He is a Darkmon, so he gets that crit damage benefit. And even though his books are 25% for his Courageous Strikes, his lead, his damage, his existence just makes him the all-time best Courageous Striker, in this man's opinion. Which is funny, because I've always wanted a Dark Indra. I do have a Dark Indra. It's just, you know, it's just Dark Indra, man. He's just that boy. And in terms of, like, Light Titan, his damage alone, you can easily hit 100 mil, if not more, depending on your book and gem situation with him by himself. I mean, Merlin's come close to that, but keep in mind we're talking about different Titans and different Titan setups. But as I stated earlier in the video, this is only one man's opinion with the advice and the research from others. So don't at me on Discord over this. Whatever is said in this video obviously comes from my mind and from my inference of these Astromons. So don't take it too to heart. And in terms of you guys saying, well, none of these mons are obtainable or these mons are hard to obtain, this is the tier list. This is simply me telling you guys what I think is the best and where it's the best at in terms of their overall performance. This has nothing to do with them being obtainable or not. Obviously, if something's hard to obtain, it should be better than something that's easy to obtain, which we can see going here in the list. So do keep that in mind. And the other thing I want to bring up too is, okay, say for instance we're talking about Wood Titan. I'm not going to bring Dark Indra into Wood Titan. I'm not going to bring this lovely dude, Wood Merlin, into Wood Titan. Why would I bring him in there? Why would I bring Light Siegfried in there? So if I'm not bringing any of these mons into Wood Titan, that leads me to go down here. So in your mind, you should see, okay, I can't use any of these S tier mons there, because if I did, that'd just be weird and it'd be a waste of a slot. Okay, so that makes Fire Shinobi, Fire Wukong, and Fire Poseidon the best mons for Wood Titan because of their damage output and their situation on the tier list. That's how I want you guys to think about this tier list. It's not a, all for one if we're attacking one Titan type only. Use this as a guide for you in your mon creation and making sure that you're keeping your mons that you need to keep if you're interested in Titans. But do remember that, this is for the assigned Titan that they are supposed to perform on. Obviously, there's going to be some debate about, okay, I think this should be this should be that, but this should hopefully give you guys a general idea of the Courageous Strikers and how well they perform in their role in the Titan that they excel at, and not just an overall, in general type thing. So do keep that in mind. But I've gone on long enough with this video, you guys. If you like the video, feel free to like it. If you guys want another tier list, I promise you I can do it. Just leave it in the comments below. But just like this one, it may be a couple months until I get to it, because this takes a lot of time and research, and your boy's trying to do other videos. We got monster reviews, we got account reviews, we got all types of stuff that I could ramble on to you for hours and hours. But yep, that's pretty much it. See ya.